Ryan, what's on your radar?
So, Republicans for years have gotten endless mileage complaining about a so-called liberal media that's biased against conservatives and tilting the scales to the left. That suspicion was only confirmed for them when Trump and the media broke out into open warfare during his presidency. But while Republicans might be right to suspect something is a bit amiss, they're misunderstanding what's really going on. If the media was infected with a genuine left-wing bias, how can you explain their coverage of the fight in Congress over the reconciliation bill, or their coverage of the withdrawal from Afghanistan, or, for that matter, their coverage of Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign? So on Thursday, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's attempt to split the sweeping reconciliation package away from a bipartisan infrastructure bill failed, and she pulled it from the floor. Biden himself had long insisted that he wanted both bills to go together, not just the small infrastructure bill. And blocking the infrastructure bill was the only way to keep both bills tethered together. Here's Biden in June.
You said you want both of these measures to come to you in tandem. Did you receive any assurances that that will happen? And how do you anticipate, what will you do?
I control that. If they don't come, I'm not signing. Real simple.
The reconciliation bill is a central part of what Biden calls his Build Back Better agenda, and it includes major parts of his American Families Plan. This is Biden's bill, and the best chance it has of getting passed is if centrists are forced to vote for it in order to get progressives to vote for their infrastructure bill. So when the bill was pulled on Friday, after it was pulled earlier on Thursday, it was a big win for the Biden agenda. Here's how the New York Times reported it. House delays vote on infrastructure in big setback for Biden agenda. So over the weekend, the Times followed up with another story and gave it this headline: Biden throws in with left, leaving his agenda in doubt. Now, there are a few nutty things about that headline, but one little thing on the side jumped out to me as well, and it was the Times' use of the word left, which is highly, highly unusual. The Times has this weird habit, instead of referring to anyone progressive or socialist as, quote, liberal. They'll often refer to Bernie Sanders or AOC as liberals who represent the party's liberal wing. Anybody who follows Democrats closely knows that Sanders and AOC are often at war with liberals, and liberals hate Bernie Sanders. Bernie is very much not a liberal. He's been screaming that for years. Here he is telling an interviewer for New England Monthly in 1985, "I am not now, nor have I ever been, a liberal Democrat." And the New York Times knows that there is a substantive difference between liberals and leftists, but they call them leftists anyway, just for fun. Yet all of a sudden, the Times isn't having so much fun anymore. And now that the left is gaining actual power, they switched, at least in this headline, to calling them the left. Now, I don't mean to pick on the New York Times here, because the rest of the media's coverage was more or less the same. But the Times is always more fun to talk about. More broadly, beyond the left liberal thing, the headline is self-evidently absurd. Paul Williams, a master's student at John Jay College of Economics, joked that when the bill was pulled, the headline would be, "Biden deals blow to Biden agenda." And that's basically later what the Times went with. The media has largely described Biden's effort to actually pass his Build Back Better agenda as, quote, lurching to the left or throwing in with the left. What's really going on here is interesting. The media believed, not without some justification, that Biden wasn't serious about all of his campaign pledges, that he was just saying that stuff to get progressive voters to show up for him, but he didn't really mean it. The Times, in fact, in its article wrote, after he vanquished Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont in the Democratic primary, he brought the liberal icon's ardent supporters into the fold by embracing much of the senator's platform, even as he ran on unifying the country. When moderate Democrats came to call, he used the tones of centrism to assure them of his conciliatory bona fides. So what's interesting here is that the press assumed Biden was lying to the Bernie people just to win them over, and they found nothing wrong with that, nothing to get angry about. Instead, the press only got angry when they discovered that he was actually telling the truth. That, it turns out, was his real crime. It was the same with Afghanistan. Biden has been publicly calling for U.S. troops to get out of Afghanistan for more than a decade. The press didn't mind him saying he'd do it. Those are just words. But when he actually withdrew, they completely melted down. In fact, we haven't seen a good media meltdown like this since Bernie Sanders won Nevada and MSNBC went through a week of convulsions.
The happiest person right now, it's about 1:15 Moscow time. This thing is going very well for Vladimir Putin. I promise you. He's probably staying up watching us right now. How you doing, Vlad?
That's absolutely right.
I'm wondering whether the Democratic moderates want Bernie Sanders to be president. I mean, that's maybe too exciting a question to raise. They don't like Trump at all. Do they want Bernie Sanders to take over the Democratic Party in perpetuity?
Largely people of color. Of those, the majority are Latino, and they are clearly, at least from eyeballing it, strongly in favor of Bernie Sanders, with Joe Biden coming in second.
The irony, of course, is that the media got exactly what it wanted. Biden came back and beat Bernie a week later, and they thought the socialist menace had been vanquished. Yet somehow the left, or the liberals, or whatever they want to call them, have refused to go away. Yesterday, AOC, Bernie Sanders, and Pramila Jayapal all appeared on Sunday shows, boosting the reconciliation bill, which shows that the media does know how to adjust to this new world we live in, but that doesn't mean they have to like it. So, Robbie, how does the New York Times come up with, and the media more broadly, how does the New York Times come up with the idea that Biden is standing in the way of Biden's agenda?
I like your complaining about the labeling. You know, this is something that we libertarians suffer at the hands of the New York Times,
call
the
you
Washington
conservatives?
Post. They tell everything. The Reason magazine, the magazine I write for, has been referred to everything from right wing or right leaning or conservative or moderate or centrist. Sometimes I've been in the New York Times write up as like a centrist voice, which I think I just have different extreme
What's wrong
views.
with libertarian? I
not heard the word.
It, but it's a libertarian magazine. Just go with it.
So in some ways, I think the interesting thing is the Times or the mainstream media is very, and I would hesitate to use the word left. They're very progressive. I prefer progressive on certain cultural, racial, social justice issues. They're not it's not a class-based leftism. So I tend to refer to them as progressive when I'm thinking of those issues. But you're right on foreign policy, on this kind of economic policy.
Yeah.
Yes, they're right. It's crazy to characterize them that way.
It's been interesting to watch. I mean, their reporting has been fine in the sense of like they've done a good job picking up scoops here and there. That like the nuts and bolts of it, totally fine. But it's the framing overall of this idea that Biden is risking his entire presidency by actually trying to accomplish the things he said he was going to accomplish as when he was running for president. It's like, how dare you actually believe in the things that you said you were going to do? It's offensive.
It's a good example of how the news media can sort of engage in spin or engage in narrative setting without actually getting any of the facts wrong or actively misleading people. But it's how they package it to kind of sell the version of the story that they want to be the one talked about by pundits and powerful people. Like, oh, yeah, setback, because that's what they decided. Even though their reporting on it is more or less accurate.
It has a self-fulfilling prophecy style to it. Right. And you saw that actually with Nevada. Coming out of Nevada, Bernie was actually pretty close in South Carolina. And nationally, he was ahead of Joe Biden in the Super Tuesday states. A week of MSNBC hammering the Sanders campaign, then followed with this like rapid consolidation that was then of Obama, Buttigieg, Beto O'Rourke, Klobuchar, everybody getting on board behind Biden, and the message going out. It produced the biggest swing in polling that has ever been recorded in modern history of polling, like within 48 hours or so, a movement of like 30 points. So what MSNBC, what the New York Times project out to their liberal audience, they are liberals, actually does matter and has its own material consequences.
Yeah, it's a good point.
But I'm looking forward to what's on your radar up next.